Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I'm your host, Jaybefaunt Leroy. Look, I'm sorry for being tardy, y'all, but nature called my name with a bullhorn, and I was like, coming. So, look, it is what it is. We are live. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, Jaybefaunt Leroy. It's so good to see all of you guys joining me here today. Just to let you guys know, if you guys have not already, please go ahead and give a like to the stream. This helps me out to be able to reach more people out there so that we can be able to encourage, inspire, and activate. Also, if you guys have not already, please subscribe to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com. Gives you email notifications whenever I go live like this, write any articles, or upload any clips like you guys get regularly throughout the week. If you guys have any questions, you guys like to ask me any questions, and I answer through video, you have to Q Bounty, like qbounty.com/Jaybefaunt, or I can react to videos that you guys find interesting if there as well. So, y'all, I am sorry. It has been a slow 24 hours for me. Partially because I had yesterday off and I'm just trying to just chill because, I'm happy to do mutual aid, but it does drain me. So like the next day I was just like, let me rest. So that's basically what I did. And then I was like, well, I had to do my show. So I had to jump back into it. So it is good to see all of you guys here today. And I haven't sipped my tea yet. So once I started getting a little bit more pepper, whatever, you guys will know that the caffeine is taking effect. So let's say hello to people in the chat. Let's get to the stories today. All right, everybody. I know you guys were waiting. We have Ever coming in hot. He says, hi, JB. Max is a great reporter who went to Iran to report while Piers is sitting comfortably in a studio hosting his Jerry Springer type show. Yeah, we're going to get into that because I'm going to be real with you. Like the first, I would say probably the first 40 minutes of his show, I didn't even watch because he was talking to this influencer that decides to break his bones in his face and take meth, and then he got a nose job, and now he's some big influencer, and he goes to Israel to chill out with Netanyahu. So I was like, nah, I'm skipping it. So yeah, it's wild out here in these streets. I'm like, what in the world? Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? I will get to the other ones from you, Edward, as well. Really good good analysis from you, by the way. We have Holly coming in saying, hi, JB. You're worth the wait. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you so very much. I deeply appreciate it. Yeah, it is it's one of those days. And then yesterday, on top of it, it was really cloudy here in Florida. I don't know what the heck was going on. I think we have like a tropical depression, or maybe it's venturing to a tropical storm. I don't start paying attention until it becomes a hurricane. Then I only take hurricanes really seriously once we are above a category 2. If it's a cat 3 or up, then that's when I start paying attention. If it's a cat 1, cat 2, it's like, all right, whatever. But if it's a cat 3, then next thing you know, I'm like, cat 4, I'm like, category 5, I'm like, all right, so we need to go to the grocery store. We got to get a few things. We got to go to the Home Depot. We got to prepare. But nothing really pops off for me. Well, partially because I'm deep inland in Orlando, so we're not near any coasts. So, but we do get flooding in certain areas here. That's pretty much it. Jacqueline coming in saying, hey, JB. Hey, everyone. Good to see you in here. Jacqueline coming in hot. Jimmy Apple. I should have brought an apple. I got apples in my kitchen right now. I should have just picked it up and just like, I said Jimmy and then took a bite of an apple. That would have been funny. Maybe next time. But Jimmy says, good afternoon, Florida man. He's called me Florida man. That's my nickname for Ron DeSantis. I call him Florida man. But yeah, thank you so very much. Jacqueline says that doesn't speak well for the public that someone like that can be an influencer. If I knew someone had been mixing with Nazi Yahoo, I wouldn't want anything to do with them. Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't want to either. All right, guys. So let's get into these stories. These are going to be some important stories to cover. A couple of the stories are actually going to be more news mixed with reactions. The first one's going to be just straight news that I found that's happening here in the state of Florida. You guys know I try to cover what's happening local as well as national and international. I try to mix it up, so that it's not all just one particular genre of news that you guys get. And so there's a lot happening. There's a lot there. And so, especially what happened over the weekend, a couple of these stories I am just going to be getting into because there's some concern from people like me. So let's get into the thumbnail. We'll talk about briefly what we're going to be discussing for today, and we'll get right into it, guys. So later today for the show, we're going to be talking about Max Blumenthal versus Piers Morgan. Look, I'm going to be real with you. Max cooked Piers. He cooked him. Well done. I mean, he even took some blackening seasoning and blackened them a little bit. I'm just saying, there's some crust there. There's some crust. But then towards the middle of our show, we're going to be talking about Rubio's list. We're going to be talking about Marco Rubio and a list that he recently put out. There's an article that was brought out to cover what Marco Rubio is, who he's going after. And this was covered by journalist Ken Klippenstein. Did I say his name right? Ken Klippenstein. And so I think we should pay very close attention to that one there. But first, we're going to be talking about Florida foreclosure crisis. So we're going to be talking about foreclosures as well as homelessness, because this is a rising issue here in the state of Florida. And so we got to get into this. And so we're going to get into this right now. It begins. And damn, that tea tastes good. So let's jump in now. Wait, before I do that, make sure. Wait. Sorry, guys. I have to I thought I had it set up and ready to go. Let me. Here we go. All right. Yes, here we go. I want to get to that. All right. Let me see. Okay. Let's get into the story right now. So, guys, look, I need to tell you that Florida is not doing good, especially in the housing market right now. So one of the things we're going to be talking about is we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about the foreclosure crisis that is happening as we speak. And on top of the foreclosure crisis, we also have an ever expanding homeless epidemic that is going on at the same time. These are really should be mentally preparing you for the onslaught that we shall be experiencing in regards to really an extreme economic downturn. Will it hit depression levels? I don't know. but I'm saying to keep your eyes open because this is going to be big because we're talking about homes. We're talking about housing here. So one of the things I do want to cover is that there was this article out of Medium a couple months back, but then I also want to go to this report as well. So we're going to talk about both. So I want to get into this because this is a pretty significant story that people need to know. And this is from Edmund Thorne. He has an article that came out in February of this year. It says red flags everywhere. Florida housing report signal a 2026 crash as inventory soars and prices sink. The blurb says inventory spikes, price cuts, investor pullbacks, and soaring insurance costs fuels new fears in Miami, Tampa, and Cape Coral. Now, just for anybody that's watching, this is pre-war with Iran. And so with a war with Iran, things intensify. Look, especially with fuel prices. And when you're building homes, how do you transport the goods to be able to build a home? You have to be able to transport the concrete to be able to get to pour for the foundations. You need to be able to have energy to be able to transport the lumber, as well as the electrical systems, the pipes, filters. I'm sorry, not pipes. The fixtures. Of course, drywall, glass. Tile, carpet, all these different things that are involved with building homes. You need energy for that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this continues to increase the cost of home as we see now. This is pre-war with Iran. And so I just want to bring that up because it's just to show the severity of the situation. So talks about Fort Lauderdale, says Florida's housing market has always moved in waves, but new reports are stirring fresh anxiety among buyers, sellers, and local officials. Analysts tracking statewide trends as inventory in several major metros have surged by more than 70% compared to last year, while prices cut are becoming more common. Some national housing researchers warned that the patterns could point to a sharp correction in 2026 if conditions don't stabilize. Miami, Tampa, and Cape Coral are drawing the most attention. These cities saw some of the fastest price growth in the country during the pandemic boom. Now they are showing some of the steepest slowdowns. One Redfin analysis found that roughly 42% of active listings in parts of South Florida saw price reductions in this winter, a sign that the sellers are struggling to attract buyers in a cooling market. So it says real estate agents say the jump in inventory is coming from several directions. Homeowners who held off selling during the pandemic are finally listing. Investors who bought properties to flip or rent are backing out of carrying costs rise. And new construction, especially in Southwest Florida, is hitting the market at the same time. Demand is softening. And so here's some of the reasons why. Insurance and HOA costs push buyers away. So it's just funny how he puts this as the first line. He says, while Florida's governor and politicians play partisan politics with rainbow crosswalks, banning books, and sending an already understaffed Florida Highway Patrol to help protect Texas borders, Florida's insurance market was collapsing. So this really is just pointing to the politicians, like, for instance, Ron DeSantis and the Florida Republican Party, how they're so focused on the culture war that they're leaving alone the economic, catastrophe that we are experiencing. And as people in Florida, we're not doing well. And people would say, well, maybe if the Democrats got in, that they would be doing better. No, not really. Because they're both owned by the same corporate powers. They're owned by the same parasite class. And so ultimately, a lot of us are at our wits' end. here in Florida. But not just that, but also we are coming to terms with the threats of climate change. It has been an extremely blazing hot summer. People have been talking about how hot it is, that it's never been this hot before. A lot of people are worried. Of course, people like me are worried about the tropics, especially with the warming of the water, because once you start to get above 80 degrees, then that's when it causes more powerful tropical depressions emerging into tropical storms, and then more powerful hurricanes that can also devastate the state. So these are the things that we are dealing with, on top of the insurance companies, the homeowners insurance companies dropping the people who need their homes to be insured in this state for good reason. So now they are up the creek without a paddle, so to speak, because the insurance companies see that the risk is too high, and they're just dropping people's policies. And so then a lot of homeowners here in Florida have to go with the insurance of last resort, which is a state-funded homeowners insurance program. Wish we did that with people in regard to health. Well, we just actually gave everybody health care, but we can do it with houses, though. And so that's some of the realities that we're living with. And on top of that, people think, well, we're doing okay because we don't have a state income tax. But a lot of the services that would pay for a state income tax, we have to pay those for those same things out of pocket. And those things that we're paying out of pocket are being ran by corporations, and corporations need what? Profit. So guess what? For those same services, instead of the tax money being $5 per person, I'm just throwing a number out there. So instead of it being $5 per person, now it's going to be $7.50 per person, because, well, the corporation got to get theirs. And we're paying straight out of our pockets instead of it being taxed from us at a lower rate. So much for saving money. Let's continue on. It says Florida's insurance market continues to be one of the biggest stress points. The Florida Office of Insurance Regulation reports that average premiums have risen sharply over the past few years due to storm losses, litigation costs, and insurer withdrawals. For many families, the cost of coverage now rivals their mortgage payment. Homeowners Association adds another layer of pressure. Yes, Homeowners Association, their fees, their dues are upwards of $300, $400, maybe even $500 because of keeping up a certain type of home value within the area. But people aren't seeing those same returns because just look at how much money they're spending. But people are also losing a lot too. And let's go to the home of foreclosures. And then I'm going to get into the next article. It says Florida is number one again for home foreclosures. Talk of a coming wave of foreclosures has spread quickly online, fueled by social media posts warning of a 2026 crash. But some data paints a more mixed picture. Foreclosure filings in Florida have risen compared to past 2 years, according to the Florida court system. But for now, they remain below the top level seen after the 2008 housing collapse, which we also know known as the Great Recession. Economists say most homeowners today have strong equity, which gives them a cushion if they need to sell. Still, rising insurance costs and HOA fees could put pressure on the households with tight budgets. If those costs keep climbing, more homeowners may struggle to keep up. The question many Floridians are asking is simple: how much can people afford? And so this is the economic situation. So you have so many less people. There's a huge drastic drop in people that are buying homes. And so now the housing stock is becoming bigger and bigger. So those of you who did maybe Econ 101 back in college, I didn't because I never went to college, but it's simple enough to explain. So that what happens when you have an extremely large supply, but the demand is very low? What happens to the price of the supply? The demand the demand is low, so therefore prices have to go down. And so now you have basically a lot of people who are buying, they're going to sit there and twiddle their thumbs until the prices go down even lower. At the same time, when it comes to being able to afford a home, this is what I was taught way back in high school, was that your down payment had to be 1% of the home value. So if your house was, you know, if you had a $200,000 home, you know, you only needed $2,000 to be able to put down on the house. Well, now the percentage is even higher. It's like 10% now. And it's, 500,000. So now you have to come up with $40,000 or $50,000 just to be able to afford down payment on a house. How many people got $40,000 or $50,000 just lying around? I sure as hell don't. I'm broke. So are a lot of people. So even still, they can't afford to be able to buy a home. So then the people who do have enough money for the down payment, they have time where they can just sit back and twiddle their thumbs. And so that housing stock continues to go up. And this also, and just put in my mind that this kind of debunks the whole affordable housing. We need to build more affordable housing. We already have the stock. We've had the stock for decades upon decades. The problem is that who's been hoarding all the stock, right? So now we're at a position where there's too much stock and there's not enough people buying, which means that you're not going to have that, which means the home values are going to go down. And when the home values of all that stock go down, what else happens? Home values of people who already own their homes are going to go down too. So that's going to be another added thing. So let's say you paid $400,000 for your home, right? And maybe a year or two ago, you valued it at like 485,000, right? So the value went up $85,000. Okay, cool. But now it dropped instead. Now your home is worth $350,000. So now you're actually underwater on your home because you paid $400,000 for it, but your home is actually, it depreciated in value. And so now the equity is gone down. And so if you sell, you're actually losing money, which means you have to hold on to the house. But what if you can't afford to hold on to the house? You know what I mean? So this is one of the biggest issues right now that we're facing, is that a lot of people, their home values are actually going down. On top of gas prices going on the rise. I think there was an article that recently came out that our strategic oil reserves, we only have like 47 days of strategic oil reserves left here in the United States because of the war with Iran. Meaning that, and then on top of that, Yemen is now closing the other strait. I think it's called the Abmedab Strait, which is on the opposite side of Saudi Arabia, which Yemen controls. And so that both that and the Strait of Hormuz being closed means that Saudi Arabia cannot export oil at all. So then what next? And that means our gas prices are going to go high, especially if we run out of strategic reserves. And by the way, just because we technically have control over Venezuela doesn't mean that it's this all crude oil is not equal. You have different types of crude, which means different types of manufacturing. So now people are going to be spending even more money just for fuel. All because the United States can't keep its hands to himself. So let's go here. I want to go to this, and then I'll also go to the article. So let me go to the tweet first. Let me see. Okay. Is it? I think so. Yes. So this is from Nick Gurley. I guess that's how you pronounce the last name, or Gurley. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. But he says sellers in Florida are beginning to do massive liquidations, in some cases taking $100,000 losses from peak prices. This townhouse in Southwest Florida sold for $304,000 in 2023 as a brand new build right near the top of the market. Just 3 years later, it's listed for $195,000. That's a $109,000 loss and 35% discount from the original purchase price. And this isn't an isolated case. Florida is now the #1 state for foreclosures and distressed sales in the U.S. For buyers, that means the biggest discounts are only just starting to emerge. So, and then he shows clips here. So take a look. Looks like a townhome, right? 195,000. Now, you asked me 10 years ago if getting a townhome for 195,000 was a good deal. I'd be like, hell no, that's too expensive. But in today's market, that's actually a pretty good deal. Now, if it continues to go down, well, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to be available to buy that type of home. But I mean, the loss of $109,000 in 3 years, that is extreme, right? And so this is, perfect example of what we're going through. Nick Gurley says some are still out there trying to convince themselves there's no housing downturn. But for those of you that are paying attention, now's the time to get involved and start making offers on houses in a market like Florida. A post-crash pricing is starting to appear. Here's the problem, though. How many people can afford the down payments? How many people have the actual credit in order to be able to get a loan from the bank to buy a home? A lot of us don't have it. How many people who are watching right now in the chat, or if you're watching this on a rewatch, in the comments, let people know, like, can you afford to buy a home in today's market if you're not a homeowner? I can't afford to buy a home. I've never owned a home, and I'm an elder millennial. I'm over 40, and I cannot afford to buy a home. Now, is that completely my fault, or is it the fault of the system? Is it my fault that wages did not keep up with inflation? Is that my fault? Is it my fault that you have there was this huge boom of people that were flipping houses like crazy in the late 90s and early 2000s in order to make profits? And they just so happened to be, privileged enough to be able to have extra money so they can buy and sell houses and flip them? Not all of us had that ability. Not all of us had that wherewithal. Not all of us had that know-how in education. We weren't privy to that. And yet, now people look at us like we're crazy if we're over 40 and we don't own a home. Well, look at the system. Number two, he says, in this case, the townhouse in Parrish, Florida, south of Tampa, is listed for $195,000, while the Zillow rent estimate is $2,400, meaning this property is well above the 1% rule for real estate investors. The property would cash flow well even with a mortgage. So, meaning, right, the rent is supposed to be above 1%. So if it's $194,000, that means the rent is supposed to be north of $1,900. And the rent estimate is $2,423. So it's about a $500 difference. Who can afford $2,423 a month for rent? Who can afford that? I know I sure as hell can't. How many bedrooms and bathrooms is this? It's 3 bedroom, 3 bath, 1,760 square feet. How many people can afford that amount? Who could afford almost $2,500 a month in rent for a 3 bedroom, 3 bath? I sure as hell can. So I'm going to share this article as well, because this actually talks about one of the biggest things in the economic downturn about U.S. foreclosures. Ooh, why is it skipping over? Sorry, guys. It's like I click on it and then it drops down one. Okay. So let's share this. This is even more recent. It says U.S. foreclosure rates by state. And this is June of 2026. Number one is Florida. So 1 in every 2,106 housing units is in foreclosure. And then number 2 is South Carolina. Number 3 is Indiana. So I want to show you guys like how extreme this is. The year-over-year change I want you guys to see. Up 21% from June of 2025. Do you guys see this? Foreclosure rates have went up 25% over 1 year. Over 20%. That's huge. We're not surviving in this state. We're underwater. Our homelessness rate is skyrocketing. And people seem to think, oh, well, you guys don't have state income tax. You guys are doing all right. Hell no, we're not. Who told you that? Makes you want to sound like King Joffrey Joffer from Coming to America. Who told you that? Because it sure as hell ain't us that's saving money. That's one of the biggest things that people need to really keep in mind. Is that the epicenter for this housing crash might just be Florida. And it spreads throughout the rest of the United States. Because if you can't afford a place to live, we are headed so they said a strategic oil reserves, I think it's about 47 days. That gives us until we're in July, August. So by mid-September, we should run out of strategic oil reserves. I give it till about the beginning of October, where we will see a skyrocket of prices for goods and services, particularly things like food, transportation costs, all different types of services, because fuel costs have gone up. And we're going to be on a downward spiral towards a social unrest. Because right now we're in a perfect storm. And then adding on top of that, people are becoming homeless. And it's becoming so much worse. I'm not going to play the entire thing, but Professor Richard Wolff was talking about the housing crisis in regards to homeless people. So not only do we have a foreclosure crisis, but we also have a housing crisis and how it's deepening. So this was recently from Professor Richard Wolff at Democracy at Work. Shout out to them for the work that they do. And let's get into this just for a little bit.
Second half of today's economic update. I am very pleased, very proud, in fact, to bring to our microphones Donald H. Whitehead Jr. He is a remarkable person, and we chose him because of that. He's a veteran homelessness, substance abuse, and racial equity expert. He has 30 years of experience, personal recovery, and leadership roles, including executive director of the National Coalition for the Homeless. He has influenced legislation, led housing initiatives, served on advisory committees, testified before Congress, and appeared on major media. He is also a comedian and an actor. So first of all, welcome, Donald Whitehead, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for having me, and I am just honored to be here today.
All right, good. Let me begin with a blunt question, but one that I know is necessary for my own work around the country. What would you say is the size or the extent of homelessness in the U.S. today? Is this a problem that we have as a society? Is it growing? That kind of, give us a framework for the rest of our conversation.
On first thought, that would be an easy question to answer. Unfortunately, it's very complicated. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, they do what's called the point in time count. And every year at the end of January, they count the number of people in shelter and the number of people on the streets of the country. So from that particular number, there's about 750,000 people on any given night. But if you look at throughout the year, I would say the number is closer to about 5 million people experiencing homelessness over that time.
Hold on. I want to go over that again, just in case some of y'all missed that point. Because a lot of people quote we have about 750,000 homeless people. I want you guys to listen to what Mr. Whitehead said once again. Because this is massive. Let me make sure I get here. Okay.
It's very complicated. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, they do what's called the point in time count. And every year at the end of January, they count the number of people in shelter and the number of people on the streets of the country.
Okay, so the point in time, basically meaning exactly what he says. So at the end of January, they count all the homeless people in the country, and then they don't count any more homeless people throughout the year. I want you to, so let's say somebody gets evicted February 1st, and then they're out in the streets. They do not get counted as homeless unless they're still homeless by the end of January next year. So if they've been homeless 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, 9 months, but then they finally get themselves slightly back on their feet, like let's say they go into a motel or something like that, or they get their shack up with friends on their couch, then they're not counted, even though for all intents and purposes they are homeless. And so let's share how many people would be homeless in a given year.
So from that particular number, there's about 750,000 people
Okay.
on any given night. But if you look at throughout the year, I would say the number is closer to about 5 million people experiencing homelessness over that time.
5 million. 5 million. I want you guys to keep that in perspective. Because we always quote these 750,000. Because back then, remember, like during the Bernie years, when everybody was, on the Bernie Sanders train, everybody was talking about over 500,000. Then it ballooned to 750,000, but that was the point in time count. And it only counted people who were on the street and in shelters. That's it. That's all. They didn't count your sibling or your cousin or your kid that's sleeping on your couch or your sofa in your living room. They're not counting them people that are living in the motels. They're not counting the people that are living in their cars and having to go to gas stations and YMCAs to shower. They're not talking about them. All those people are left out of the count. Now we're talking about this on top of, see, the caffeine kicked in. They're talking about this on top of the huge surge in foreclosures that people are experiencing in this state. So I want you guys to let this soak into your brain, as my 6th grade math teacher, Miss Graham, used to tell us. Let it soak into your brain that there's so many housing insecure people right now that if we start to see social unrest right before or during or right after the midterm elections, you're going to know why, or you're going to know exactly why this is happening. And a lot of these people that want to get stuck on the culture war, I'm talking mainly about the conservatives. They want to get stuck on the culture war and talk about trans people in bathrooms, and they want to talk about we have to they get stuck on things like wanting to make people read the Bible in schools and things like that. Like, they're now focused on the economy, which also puts them in trouble during the midterms. But then the Democrats are not going to look too good either, because a lot of them, with the exception of maybe a few DSA candidates, they're not actually talking about the economy, or they're doing the same song, a different dance to the same song that's been sung since 2020. And that's played out. And so keep this in mind. Now, let him finish, but I just want you guys to get the gravity of the situation, because a crash is a coming. All right, let's go.
What the point in time count is good for is to look at trends. And what we saw between 2024 and 2026, 2023 and 2025 was a 30% increase in homelessness, one of the largest increases in history. This year we saw a slight decrease, but we think that has more to do with people being forced into isolation than it does with anything else. And I can talk more about that a little later.
I'm struck because our mutual friend, Rob Robinson, gives a wonderful talk about this point in time being chosen in the depths of winter,
yes,
when people are desperately trying to find, of course, a way out of the cold. Well, the number you would get would be quite different if it were July or June or something like that.
Absolutely.
All right. I want to get to, before we get into too many of the weeds there, I want to get some of the bigger issues. It seems to me that we now are in a time when an increasing number of states, or at least people across this country, view the homeless, maybe because it's growing, the homeless problem, as though the people who have no home are ipso facto criminals in some sense. It's called, I believe, the criminalization of homelessness. Tell us about what does that mean, and is that happening, and what's going on there?
So basically, what it means is that people are fined, they're jailed, they're arrested simply because they're homeless. So, regardless of what the issue may be, regardless of the underlying issue that got them there, the way it's being treated in many cities. There was a Supreme Court decision back in 2024, the Grants Pass versus Johnson decision. Prior to that, if there wasn't enough shelter in a community, you couldn't arrest, fine, or jail people. But that decision, the Supreme Court found that it wasn't cruel or unusual to arrest people, even if you didn't have enough shelter. The problem with that decision is there's not enough shelter in the United States. And since that time, over 360 cities have instituted these policies that make it criminal to be homeless in America. Now, we've always had vagrancy laws. They got outlawed in the 70s, but there's more of a mean-spirited approach these days when it comes to the homeless population.
And then the idea is, I just want to get it in my head, that a person who, for example, doesn't have enough income or doesn't have a job and therefore can't pay for a home is a criminal because he or she can't pay for the home. There's a step missing there. Normally, doesn't it? A criminal has to do a bad thing. This is not a bad thing. This is, I mean, it's a tragedy for the individual, but what's the point of putting them in jail when they're only going to therefore have even poorer chance of ever earning the income needed to have a home?
And the other part of that is when they're released.
So the point is slavery. Look, I'm gonna take it there. I'm gonna take it there because you know what? A lot of people and they're really good. They're getting into the exploitation of it. So I don't want to take that from them. But if these were two like liberals talking, they wouldn't go there. But thankfully, you know, you got Professor Richard Wolff right there. And this gentleman, they know like the whole like what the purpose is of, right? And they're gonna get into it, but a lot of these for-profit prisons, right? These for-profit prisons, and even state institutions, they need people to be locked up. Let me ask you something. Those of you who have had a loved one, a family member locked up, whether it be jail or prison, what happens when you get that phone call from the prison? What do they ask you before you can even talk to your family member that's an inmate? Do you accept what? Everybody in the chat. Do you accept what? Anybody? They say, do you accept the charges? Right? Because even though now you don't have to pay for minutes on the phone, like what is this? The year 2000 and we're still buying minutes, you know, with Singular, and then we have to wait until after 9 p.m. for calls to be free? What kind of BS is that? But apparently they haven't caught up with times now, right? Yes, exactly, Sila. For this collect call, you have to pay for the minutes. And it's like, $4 or $5 a minute just to talk to a loved one that is locked up. Meanwhile, I can pick up my cell phone and I can call a family member on the other. I can call a friend that lives in Seattle right now, and I don't have to pay per minute. If I really wanted to get in touch with somebody on the other side of the planet, like for instance, Dr. Luna Oy, right? If I wanted to call her and she's in Vietnam, I won't even need to use my cell signal. I would just need to use the internet, and there's no cost to me. And yet, they charge us per minute to call somebody. So what I'm getting at is these companies that operate the phone service in these jails and prisons, the companies that also operate commissary, you got Dannon, Nabisco, Gillette, Kimberly-Clark. You got all these big corporations that also operate in order to have their commissary. You have Kellogg's, General Mills, all these companies, right? Little Debbie snacks. Where do you think the honey buns come from? Right? Philip Morris for the cigarettes. They get all that money from the prisons, from the jails, even in state institutions. And they got to keep that prison population up so they can keep making what? Money. And who is the low-hanging fruit to go after? Homeless people, unhoused. And their crime isn't laziness, because over 40% of homeless people actually have jobs. It's not laziness. It's criminalization for a circumstance that they didn't create and a system that they didn't build. And this is the problem. And so we have all these foreclosures. How many of those people that have been in the 20% spike of foreclosures in the last 2 years here in Florida, how many of those people are homeless now? Do you know how many people who have bachelor's and master's degrees that are literally out on the street right now? And then their only way of keeping cool in this godforsaken heat here in Florida is by going to the Orlando Public Library just to be able to cool down and be able to get a drink of water from the water fountain and use the bathroom with some dignity. And people want to blame them for their lot in life, when in reality, and I love this quote. This is one of my favorite quotes. If a flower doesn't grow, you change the environment in which the flower grows, not the flower. Why in the world would I blame all these flowers in this field for not blooming instead of inspecting the actual environment in which they are refusing to grow? And it's not even that they're refusing to grow, it's that the conditions are not conducive for them to grow. So what do I have to do? Change the environment. But somebody makes money off of the flowers not blooming. And guess what? They want to keep it that way. So you try to change it, and then at night, they take that salt, that Epsom salt, and they spread it all over the ground. And then you can't keep coming back and be like, man, I thought I tried to change the environment, and you're doing it flower by flower, but then somebody keeps sabotaging it again. You know, that's the crazy part about it. There's a point here that he also gets into that I want to get into in a little bit, and then we'll be wrapping this up. But let's continue on.
They're still homeless. You haven't solved their homelessness at all.
Exactly.
You've delayed it, but you've also provided the illusion that you're actually doing something about homelessness. What solves homelessness is housing. It's institutionalization that the person is requesting. So we not only see the institutionalization in jail, we see some communities forcing people into mental health institutions. So it really is really out of hand. It's gotten to a place where it's a draconian practice. 2 examples: in Tennessee, it's a felony with up to 6 years in prison. In Louisiana, the person can be sentenced to hard labor. And in Kentucky, they had a stand your ground law that says you can use violence up to and including deadly violence if you find someone homeless on your property.
Well, how do you account for this? What's going on here?
The administration, the current administration, the Trump administration, issued an executive order that basically says he wanted to clean the streets of America, and he actually in that did actually point out homeless people as part of cleaning streets in America. So it dehumanizes, it criminalizes people experiencing homelessness. And the true issue is the underlying reasons behind homelessness are the lack of affordable housing. And even if people do have sometimes sometimes mental or substance abuse issues, they should be given substance abuse treatment. And jail, we know that 80% of the people with mental health issues don't get treatment there. So it's not solving the problem in any way. But this is something the administration, it's kind of similar with spending all of our dollars on fountains and beautification versus spending the dollars we need to provide housing.
You know, I'm an economist, and I can attest to the incredible rise in rents in this country. Nobody who has even a passing knowledge of our economy would be unaware that obviously homelessness rising has something to do with the rising cost of homes, especially with the absolute increase, or even if you relate the increase in the price of housing to the increase in wages and salaries. They don't keep up with the price of the rentals, and therefore we're going to get home. I mean, blaming the individual who's homeless under these circumstances strikes me as cruel and unjust and immoral behavior, but we're getting used to it.
Well, it absolutely lets the government, who is truly responsible for providing resources to keep up with inflation and housing costs. Harvard just did a study, and the gap in affordable housing is at the highest in our history. The National Low Income Housing Coalition does a study, and what they find is that people earning minimum wage can't find housing anywhere in the United States for a 2-bedroom and only 10% for a 1-bedroom. So it's the structural issues that are.
So you're talking about the Out of Reach report, which we have talked about before. And if you guys were watching last week when I was talking about housing, I brought up an article that came out last year where in the state of Florida, you have to make around $70,000 a year to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. $70,000 a year to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. I did not stutter. That's how expensive it is to live in Florida. Florida is the 9th most expensive state in the country to live in. A red state. Everybody's like, oh my God, the blue states are so expensive. Florida's expensive too. And we don't have a state income tax. Oh my goodness, how could that be? Well, when you let corporations own your government, well, then it makes it a lot more harder to afford where you need to live. And one of the things that I also wanted to bring out that he brings out a little bit later, and I'm going to put the link for this in the chat for you guys so you guys can reference that rest of that video, because this is a great conversation. It's, deeply informative. And I encourage you all to share the second part of that video, especially with your family, friends, and neighbors, is that a lot of the people who are not counted are people who live in hotels and motels, right? They're the people who live in their cars. They're the people who live on their couch. They even talk about the people who are shacked up to a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment, 3, 4, 5 people at once. that is also still an emblematic of homelessness. Well, also, and maybe this is the radical in me, but the children who are adults that still live with their parents, but they can't afford to leave their home, and they're only staying with their parents out of duress, that's also homelessness. I know some people are going to come into my comments and go, oh no, they just chose to stay there. No, if it's done under duress. Do I have to go over the definition of duress again on this channel? It's been a while. I probably should. But if you have to do something under duress, that means it is not really a free choice. So you have a lot of adult children that are still living with their parents who are only doing it not because they really want to stay with their parents, but because they can't afford to move out. And so then, because if they weren't with their parents, where would they be? Anyone? Anyone? Raise your hand in the class. Oh, they'd be homeless. Oh, well, why? Wow. You think? And this is why even children are still adult kids that are still living at home with their parents, if they are doing so, not out of free choice, but out of duress, I consider them homeless. I consider them unhoused. People are like, oh, well, they're just trying to save money so they can get their own. Well, why should they have to stay at their home? Why can't we just do it back in the day where if you are a young person and you want to be on your own and you don't want to have to live with your parents, you can rent a modest 1-bedroom apartment and then still have enough money to be able to save up to buy a home down the line. You can't do that anymore. I was at work, like 2 weeks ago, and the customer, he was a boomer, and he's telling me, literally, he's like, man, he's complimenting me on my customer service. And he was saying, companies, man, if they don't take care of their workers, man, then the quality of service goes down. I was like, yeah, definitely, man. Like we were here. And then he goes with the line, man, kids don't want to work these days. And that's when he switched up on me like that. And I was like, well, no, it's not that they don't want to work. It's that they don't want to be overly exploited anymore. And he was like, nah, it's not that. And he tried to explain it as they're just lazy and they just want to get something for nothing. And I was like, and he was generalizing all kids for what he considers kids, young people, young adults, for not wanting to be overly exploited. But here's the crazy part. You know what the gag is? They don't want to be overly exploited and they're trying to refuse it, but they're being put under duress so much that they have to choose exploitation at that level anyway. And it's not that they don't want to work. They do. They just want to be under dignified and fair circumstances. And if anybody who is millennial, Gen X, baby boomer, they say, well, I had to struggle. First of all, since when are you of the mind that you do not want your kids to have it easier than you had it? When did that mentality go out the window? First of all, because by the way, y'all taught the younger generation. When older people complain about the younger generation, that's your doing. That's your doing that influenced them. We millennials, if we're complaining about Gen Z and Gen Alpha, guess what? That's on us. Gen X, if you guys are complaining about millennials and Gen Z, well, guess what? That's on y'all. And if you're a boomer, if you complain about Gen X and millennials, well, that's on you. And here's the thing. right? If you're saying, well, we had to struggle, why would you want your kids to struggle like you did? Now, you want to teach them the value of what you've learned through that struggle, yes. But at the same time, here's my question. If you go line by line and how much you had to work, how much you got paid, the ratio in debt to income and the ratio in pay to debt that you had back then, and then you put it next to the ratio of what they have to do now, you'll notice that they are actually doing worse off than you did when you were their age. They are even worse off. Gen Z is worse off than my generation. And guess what? Guess who's next? Gen Alpha. And all of Gen Alpha has already been born. Gen Alpha is done. Any babies that are being born now is Gen Beta. Gen Alphas, they're done being born. The last Gen Alphas were born like last year or a year before that. It's all Gen Beta now. That's actually the little kids now. And so the thing is, like, we have to get to ourselves to a point where we start to look at and go, hey, we got to change this system, because these kids are literally being born into something so much worse than what we were under, and it was difficult for us. And I think it's the most loving thing to do for us to have a system where things are easier while still inculcating the same lessons that we learned. Because it's the same, to me, it's the same mindset of, well, I had to suffer and get lupus. I'm sorry, and polio back in the day. And now I have this limp for the rest of my life. So you got to go through it too. Don't you get that polio vaccine? What? Or I had to ride a horse and buggy back in the day. That you need to do the same thing. And if your horse, injures his leg, you have to put that horse down just like I did. You know what I mean? Come on now. Let's be real. But I'm not saying this to complain about different generations. What I'm saying is like, we have an obligation to people who haven't even asked to be here. We have an obligation to make sure that their lives are as full of dignity as possible to people who did not ask to be here. That is our duty as older generations. And part of that is making sure that the homelessness rate doesn't exist. That people have housing, that people have shelter, that people are able to have what they need in order to thrive, so that they still have an appreciation for life that we have. But their appreciation is born from observation as well as empathy, and not necessarily having to hit their head on the concrete like we did. And so, yes, there is a crisis coming. And are we doing what we can for our younger ones so that we make it easier for them to get ourselves, humanity, out of this situation? We may not be able to build the full ladder to get out of this hole, but could we put a couple of pegs in the ladder so that they can go up a couple steps and then they can put a few pegs in themselves? I think we owe that to them. And maybe, just maybe, if we're still down there because we weren't able to climb that ladder, after they get out, then they can make a pulley and pull us up with them. Go ahead and give a like to the stream, everybody. Let's go in to the chats and we shall get into the next one. Let's go into the kick. Let's see what is any gifted subs. I think we're okay. All right, we're good there. Let's check on the Rumble. See if we have any Rumble rants. I think we're okay right now. Yeah, we're good on Rumble rants. I will get to some chats in the Rumble though. All right, so let's get into the chats here. I'm gonna save that for the Rubio segments. I want to address this because this one was funny. Roger Meadows says, still laughing, you called my profile pic United Negro College Fund. I'm sorry, but you did look like Lou Rawls smiling in the United Negro College Fund picture. Because a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And you know, Roger is all about education, so it works. It works. I just, you know, yeah, we kid because we love. Thank you so very much for this one, Roger, who's been a member, a channel member for 5 months. Says, blame Mamdani for chasing the rich out of New York to Florida. I mean, I wish that was the case. I mean, first of all, I mean, if you're, you know, if the rich are actually leaving because of Mamdani, but if that was the case, then they would just now be leaving. But a lot of rich people, a lot of well-to-do people from New York and Philadelphia, New Jersey, Connecticut, Michigan, you know, what have you, Massachusetts, they've already been coming here for years. I know you're kidding, but they've been coming here for years, man. And our state's already been like this for quite a long time. You know, I'm a transplant from New Jersey, but it was because, you know, we lived in Camden and my mom was like, I am not raising 3 boys in Camden in the crack epidemic of the 80s. So no. So that's why I'm here. But we didn't gentrify none. Roger says, you need to debate Larry on this subject. You're living in the libertarian fantasy. Plus, he says the left controls YouTube. Yeah, the left definitely does not control YouTube. No. By no means does the left control YouTube. I mean, if he wants to talk about liberals, but I mean, the right, you know, the far right, I mean, they have huge numbers on platforms like YouTube. Like, and they're all over, like Rumble. They're all over Rumble. And they're all over Kick now. Like, no, it's not that way. No. Just look at, you know, a lot of the right-wing channels. Like, they're, you know, 10, 20, maybe 100 times bigger than my channel. And then on top of that, libertarian fantasy is like, what fantasy? Like, we're literally, you know, like I just talked about, like, our foreclosure rate just jumped, you know, 20% in a couple of years. Like, what fantasy is it for people actually living here? You know. But as far as debating, I'm not a debater. Number one, I'm terrible at debating. I don't like the feeling of having to debate. And so I'm not the right guy. You know, I'm not a debater, and I'm not a debate me bro type. You know, I'm just not that dude. But I hope people are paying attention to this state and what it goes, you know, what we're going through. Jimmy from Rumble, blanking on names now. On Rumble, he says, since when were investments guaranteed to pay off? If everyone who owns homes already feels hypothetical financial pain, I don't care. I worked my entire life. I deserve to be able to own a home. I mean, everyone deserves to be able to own a home. The problem is that the barriers to be able to get one is harder every single year. You know, shouldn't it get easier? But no, it's not. And oh, by the way, before I get to the super chat, we talk about being able to build generational wealth. What about those of us who have had that generational wealth taken from right underneath our noses? Like those of us who have family members that were victims of deed theft, and the homes that we were supposed to inherit are no longer in our families anymore, like mine. You know what I mean? And being able to commit deed theft, well, let's be real. That is basically not having regulation, which sounds kind of libertarian to me. You know, it's kind of, you know, it's like no regulation. It's like, well, you slept on your property taxes, so we can just take that home from you. You know, it's, I don't know. But at the same time, also, I'm one of those people who I'm on paper, I am not against people only having to pay their property tax once, and then for the rest of the years that they own them, they don't have to. Here's the problem though. When you first get a home and you put your down payment on the home and you have to pay the monthly mortgage, right? Let's say you have a $400,000 house that you bought, right? And let's say the property tax is 10%. I'm just making it easy, right? So $40,000. Are you going to be paying the $40,000 plus the 20% down payment on top of that? Are you going to be able to do all that all at once, or should the property tax be spanned throughout the 30 years of the mortgage? Makes it easier just to span it out. Now, I am of the opinion that once the home is paid off, you shouldn't have to pay property taxes. But here's the problem. Where does that money going to come from if the property taxes are no longer collected? Who is going to be footing the bill for all the services that we need for people who live in the state? And also, our public schools are funded through property taxes. Where are we going to get that money from? Now, I am cool. I am chill with us getting it from people who live here who are the super rich, like a John Morgan, like a Jeff Bezos, like a Donald Trump. Because yes, guess what? He is a Floridian now. So I am not against taxing them out of their billionaire status. Hell, I am cool with taxing them to the point where they are only in the value of tens of millions. Take like 90% of that. I'm okay with that. At the same time, though, if we do, that means that it's going to have to be a drastic change to the system, because we can no longer keep it the way it is, which is what Marco Rubio is very scared of, which is what we're going to get into in the next segment. Thank you so much for the super chat, Roger. He says, woo, you see that debate between Crystal Ball and Smith. Wait, KB and Smith. Oh, Crystal Ball and Smith, Sawan's person. Adam Smith, Sawan's person to beat on breaking points. Adam got hot. Crystal stayed cool while laughing at him. Crystal Ball now interviewed Sawan. Oh, wow. So she actually interviewed Adam Smith. Okay, well, it's only fair that she brings on Shama Sawant to talk about her policy platform and, you know, what she would do in regards to foreign and domestic policy for the people in Seattle. I mean, that's only fair. Like, if you're going to talk to her opponent, then you need to talk to her as well. And don't just talk to the people who are in the duopoly, talk to all the candidates. Because if you don't talk to her, then we're going to be looking at you sideways. But, I mean, if she took them to task, then good. Okay, I applaud that. Now, have Shama Sawan on. Give her the exact same amount of time and ask the same tough questions that you asked Adam Smith. And then let people judge for themselves. And if she does that, okay, great. Kudos to her for that one. I appreciate it. Roger, also, thank you for this one. He says, good news. 90% of Floridians make less than $200,000. If placed on the ballot, this would be ratified. I sent you my CBI tax Florida proposal. You know what to do. Yeah, thank you so very much. Yeah, 90% of Floridians make under $200,000 a year. That is $200,000 a year is not what we used to think it was. And so, you know, a lot of us are that broke. Half of y'all that are watching this channel right now are technically considered homeless. You may not feel like it, but you are. And I'm of the opinion, and maybe this is, I don't know. I hope I'm not being overbearing by saying this. But we need to be okay with saying, hey, I'm homeless. Hey, I'm going through this. We need to take the shame out of being a victim of the system. We need to take the shame out of it. If this system is raking you over the coals, name the transgression that this system has caused and say, yes, they have done this to me, and this is why it needs to end. Name the transgression and shame the system. Don't hide away from it. Have I been homeless before? Yes. I know what it's like to be homeless as a child and as an adult. I have family members that also are currently homeless. So, yes, I know what that's like. So, there's no shame in that. Do not be ashamed of what this system does to you, because here's the point. The system requires people to be homeless. It requires for you to have trauma. It requires you to be in poverty. And so if that's the case, that means that you being in this situation is not an absolute choice. And yes, we make mistakes, but at the same time, when you make it so that it is easy to fall into this, then it is not completely your fault. That's like rolling down a street with a bunch of potholes, and then also somebody obstructs your vision, but then you might have one free hand that's kind of bound a little bit, and you can kind of like lift the bandage up over your eye to see. And so do you bear some responsibility for some of the potholes you may run over? Yeah, a little bit, but it's not absolute. Because who put the potholes there in the first place? Who obstructed your vision in the first place? Who bound your hands in the first place? Shouldn't they bear some of the, or most of the responsibility for your plight? Yes. Should you bear all the responsibility? No. So should you be ashamed of falling into a pothole? No, because guess what? A lot of that is because it's been done on purpose so that you would fall into one of those potholes. This is why I tell people on my channel, and it's very radical, that if you're homeless, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You didn't wake up one day and go, oh, I think I'm going to be homeless. And also the trauma that influenced you to get into that position is not your fault either. Because you and your family have been caught in this vicious cycle for the last 500 years. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel, guys. If you're new. Roger, thank you very much. Says JB, you're going to have to run a CBI in a minute to introduce new taxes. Introducing new taxes, 66%. Yeah, that's true. To introduce new taxes, you have to have a 66% vote when it comes to ballot initiatives. Typically it's 60%, but it has to be 66%. So basically 2/3 of the entire electorate needs to be able to ratify that into law. Good question by Jacqueline. Says, how many people incarcerated have no home to go to when they are released? Exactly. This also contributes to the recidivism rates that we see among people who have been unhoused, that have been incarcerated, and now they're back out in the streets again, and then they get rearrested again, only to be, placed back into custody. And guess what? All that money, the court costs, and all these different fees that they put on top of them as well, they can't afford to get out of that either. And so they may keep them in jail even longer. Roger, thank you very much for this. He says, kids don't want to work, companies want experience. But the problem is, like, the companies want all this experience, but the kids ain't got no experience. It's a vicious cycle. Thank you very much for that, by the way. Roger says, kids start forming worker cooperatives while still in college. Upon graduation, you don't have to worry about job market and companies saying, sorry, we got AI. Yeah. They're trying to lock you out, man. They're trying to lock you out big time. Thank you very much for this, Roger. He says, trade and property tax for a municipal income tax. And then use the municipal income tax that's collected to invest into the market through a city or municipal public bank. I see where you're going. Roger. Okay, thank you so very much for that. All right, guys. Anand says today is election day in Washington. Oh, wait. Did they have on Shama Swan already? Because if today's well, no, it's a primary. Wait, is it the election day or is it a primary? I need to look into that. And did they have her on before election day? If they didn't, well, that's their bad. All right. Now, let's get into the next segment. But first, we're going to say a shout out to all the patrons on Patreon. Thank you guys so very much. I'm thinking about changing the name of the patron levels, but I'll figure it out. But thank you so very much to patrons on Patreon, Mega Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, and Jaybefaunters. And also thank you to Comrade, Solidarity, and JB members and all new members. Thank you so very much for helping keep this channel afloat. I appreciate it very much. You guys make this channel possible. And you guys are the real ones. I appreciate it so very much. Anybody that helps out, even if you just share, hype the video, you're a real one. It helps regardless. Even you watching right now, you're a real one. I appreciate it. All right, let's get into the next segment. This one's going to be interesting because we got to talk about Marco Rubio. Yeah. So of course we talked about housing, right? Wait, did it? Why is this? Okay, hang on. because I do not like when this happens. Hang on, just give me 1 second. Okay, let me do this again. I don't know why it does this. Okay, perfect. All right, so now we're going to talk about Rubio's list. This list that he came out with is concerning. And I'm going to be honest with you, looking at Marco Rubio and who he is, I think that he is more dangerous than Trump. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is the most dangerous man in America as we speak. He is not only Secretary of State, but he also simultaneously holds the office of National Security Advisor. He is the second person in U.S. history to hold both offices simultaneously at the same time. The first one was the notorious and grotesque Henry Kissinger. So, guys, we're going to talk about why he's so dangerous. We're also going to talk about the list that he has against left-wing groups, as well as people who are to be considered on the left. Some people who are on the list, I actually don't consider them to be on the left. They're actually more liberal than anything. And to me, liberal is actually on the right. But they're trying to go after anybody that they feel is a threat to U.S. power and hegemony, especially within the imperial core. So we're going to be getting into this right now. And so one of the things that I want to bring out is this. This is going to be a part about Marco Rubio, and he gave a speech, and he also gave a list, a breakdown of what he considers to be threats to the United States. And these are really what he's considering to be proxies or influencers from Cuba. As we all know, Marco Rubio has had it in for Cuba for pretty much all his life. He is basically just a European that just so happened to have been born in Cuba, essentially. He is just a colonizer that was born in Cuba. I mean, a gusano, as so affectionately called by Cubans. So I'm going to get into this, and then we're also going to go over the list by journalist Ken Klippenstein, and we shall talk on the other side. So he is talking at the resurgence of political terrorism. So this is the conference that he spoke. So let's get into this.
This is a distinctive and unique evil. It has always been driven by a hatred, above all else, a hatred for civilization itself. It is a revolt of the worst against the best, a revolt of the weak and the cowardly against the strong and the good. It is perpetrated by those who cannot build, who cannot create, who cannot achieve great things, and take their revenge upon the world for their own inadequacy by seeking to destroy those who can.
Every accusation is confession. As you listen to this, I want you to think of the United States that he's talking about. Just imagine every single time he says Cuba, think the United States, and things will start to make more sense in your mind. Because Marco Rubio is full of it. He's so full of it that his eyes are brown. And so he's trying to basically do the whole this is a neo Red Scare, 21st century Red Scare propaganda that he's trying to drum up because the empire is on its way out. and they're throwing spaghetti against the wall to see if it sticks. So let's continue. He is a grotesque human being.
This is what radical leftism is. It may wear various different slogans and ideologies across place and time. They can call themselves anti-capitalist or anti-imperialist or communist or anarchist or Marxist, but the fundamental character is always the same. It's always the same. It is a poisonous resentment cloaked in the language of equality and justice, and liberation, an overwhelming need to tear down what greater men have built, to wreck what is beautiful and what is right.
To a dung beetle, a pile of shit is beautiful and right. Here's the thing. Resentment, yes. Absolutely resentment. What did I just talk about? What did I just talk about? 20% rise in foreclosure rates. Possibly 5 million people per year experiencing homelessness. We got people right now. I work in the food industry. How much food are we wasting and throwing away when people could just, we could be feeding the people who are out in these streets? By greater men? What in the hell? What are you talking about? Nobody's greater than anybody. What do you mean greater men? You mean the men that imprison my people, my ancestors? You want to talk about them as being greater? Are you sniffing your own farts, Marco? That's got to be what it is. Because here's the problem. You're regarding human trafficking slaveholders as greater men. My God. These are the end times. What's down is up and what's up is down. What's right is wrong is right. What's bitter is sweet and what's sweet is bitter. My God, if the Antichrist was a human being, you'd be looking at him right now. His name is Marco Narco Rubio. My goodness. The nerve of this colonizer, this bootlicking colonizer, talking about saying that we shouldn't be resenting the grotesque things that this country has done in the name of freedom and democracy, when in reality, they're spreading violence, depravity, death, totalitarian regimes. This is blatant. This is blatant, just anti-human rhetoric from the Secretary of State. Let's continue on.
And what is right on behalf of people who are only filled with ugliness and have nothing else to offer the world. Through violence and through terror, they once again seek to impose their ugliness on all of us. The old dogma was wrong. The old dogma was wrong. None of this is driven by idealism. It is not utopian. In fact, it is the opposite. One of the criticisms you sometimes hear of communism, for example, is that it sounds good in theory, but it never works in practice. That's actually not true. Communism does not sound good in theory. The world it envisions for all of us is small, flat, gray, leveled of all exception, drained of all that is good and noble in the human soul. The world it envisions is a world without courage, a world without creativity or ambition, a world without heroes or glory or great causes to strive towards, without a world without miracles, without myths, without men who rise above the rest to do incredible and extraordinary things.
You know what's funny? First of all, there's never been an actual communist country. Let's get that out of the way, because a lot of people seem to confuse that because a lot of people don't know the difference between communism and socialism. So there's never actually been a communist country. There's been communist parties that have used the vehicle of socialism to advance their countries. Like, for instance, the Soviet Union. Let me just ask Marco Rubio one thing. What came first? Did Sputnik come first with the Soviet space program, or did NASA come first? We talk about dreaming of doing things and advancing ourselves beyond what we are capable of. Who went to space first? Wait, was it in 1920 when women in the Soviet Union were actually given the right to make choices over their own bodies? In 1920. Meanwhile, here in the United States, only 1 year later, you guys actually burned a Black Wall Street down in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma. So, look, the math ain't mathing, Marco. Now, don't get me wrong, right? Every single country has its flaws. No country is perfect, right? At the same time, though, you're trying to make a case for the system that we've been living under for what? Ever since the inception of this country. And look at what we have to show for it. So if somebody wants to go in a completely different direction, you're demonizing them for wanting to go into a different direction because of the failures and contradictions of this system. And you cannot improve capitalism to go into the way that favors people, because capitalism is a system that puts capital profits above the lives of other people, as well as its stakeholders, which would be the environment and the ecosystems and our plant and animal life. It is not profitable to make sure that people, ecosystems, plant and animal life is actually preserved and able to thrive. Because if that was the case, then we wouldn't be going through what we're going through right now. Our society would be thriving a whole lot more. But like I said in the last segment, capitalism requires an underclass of people to be under duress and to be exploited in order for a small group of people at the top to have their own paradise on earth. So they get to have their paradise while alive, while you have to wait to die to get yours. And this is what Marco Rubio is advocating for. I'm going to try not to keep pausing, but it's just so many things he says. But let's finish up.
And the world communism envisions is a world without God. For these architects of revolutionary violence, the towering achievement of our civilization, for them, it's an unbearable humiliation, a reminder of what they cannot do, and a reminder of what they cannot be.
A reminder that we cannot subject people to slavery. A reminder that we cannot, in good conscience, exploit people to the point where they live under duress. A reminder that we cannot wage wars for profit. We cannot do any of these things. It's kind of funny because people like Marco Rubio would be the type of people that would he would demean and talk down about people like Nat Turner, who led slave rebellions. That's the type of person that Marco Rubio would be. Yeah. He would look at people like Nat Turner and call him a terrorist for leading a slave rebellion. It wasn't black folks. It wasn't us that put ourselves into slavery like that. We didn't put ourselves into chattel slavery. And yet, Marco Rubio would finger wag at people like him. And then he would look down at people like John Brown and say, you're a traitor to your own race. You're a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. You're supposed to be with us. And yet you chose to be with them. That's who Marco Rubio would look down his nose at. Instead, he wants to stand there as a representative of people who have done unspeakably horrible things and think, well, they were advancing society. And these people that advance society are standing on a massive, lofty pile of skulls and bones of human beings that they've raped, tortured, and pillaged. This is sick human behavior from him. This is why Marco Rubio is a very dangerous man. Let's continue.
So they choose instead to destroy. They attack pipelines. They attack railroads. They attack power grids and laboratories, the physical embodied symbols of power and invention and achievement. This is the nature of the terrorism we face today. They despise the West because the West is great.
They don't despise the West because it's great in the positive sense. They despise the West because it's great in an awful and negative sense in what it's done to the world. But let me share, I'm going to share this tweet, and then we will get into the article by Clayton Klippenstein. And so shout out to Ben Norton for this one. He has a post here on Twitter that addresses this. And shout out to him for this one. Ben Norton says, McCarthyism is back. The U.S. State Department just published an insane McCarthyite report that maliciously portrays leading left-wing groups in the U.S. as supposed front groups for Cuba. This is part of an authoritarian attempt led by Marco Rubio to criminalize and persecute leftist groups that oppose the U.S. empire's crimes at home and around the world. Some of the organizations, and I will get into this, being targeted are in this fascistic crackdown are Code Pink, the People's Forum, DSA, Black Alliance for Peace. I'm gonna hone in on that when we get into the rest of the list. The National Lawyers Guild and Pastors for Peace. And then he talks about, it says Cuba, the capital of 21st century communism. And it was prepared by the State Department. And then it says here, part 7, front groups and fellow travelers. And then it goes into National Network on Cuba. It says one of ICAP's major U.S. counterparts is the National Network on Cuba, a coalition of more than 60 American groups, including the Democratic Socialists of America, National Lawyers Guild, Code Pink, and the Communist Party USA, which is formally committed to lobbying for an end to U.S. embargo and other quote-unquote imperialist policies against Cuba. And an OC functions as another key node for coordination between the Cuban regime and the American far left, partnering with ICAP every year to coordinate U.S. delegations to Cuba and conduct solidarity conferences in which the American activists meet with Cuban officials to devise strategies for expanding and exploiting Cuban influence networks in the United States. You know what's funny about this? They would never, ever say this about AIPAC. Ever say this about AIPAC. And yet, here's the thing. This group does not contribute, as far as I know, to political campaigns here in the United States. They're not lobbyists that are controlling our politicians. Every accusation is a confession. Everyone. Because they keep talking about Cuba. I want you in your mind to replace Cuba with Israel. And every single time they describe the horrors and evils of Cuba, I want you to put in your mind Israel. Because they're trying to take attention off of Israel and put it on Cuba. But is Cuba committing a genocide right now? Since when is sending doctors to help people in other countries committing genocide? If committing genocide, the goal is to murder many people, well, they're doing an awful job of it. They're actually saving lives. They are awful. They suck at genocide. It's not even in their goal. They're out there giving people eyesight and fixing people's teeth and delivering babies. Let's continue on. And then this one says, the People's Forum, in recent years, People's Forum has emerged as one of the most significant left-wing protest groups in the United States, serving as a centralized hub for anti-Trump, anti-ICE, pro-Cuban agitation. The group's rapid rise to prominence tracks with skyrocketing financial. And they talk about who finances them, right? So basically is just so that they can clamp down on anybody that is criticizing the United States and Israel. That's pretty much what it is. Let's get into the article because I want to share this. And I want to give a shout out to Ken Klippenstein for this article. Make sure this is big. Oh, yeah, it's big enough. So his article says, after political terrorism summit, U.S. names 43 Americans plus groups. Let's get into this. So basically, I already read over that. So if you guys want to read this, hit part of his article about the summit that Marco Rubio has, we can get into that. I'll show you guys that. But here is the list. So we're going to start off with Suzanne Adderley. It says president of the National Lawyers Guild, who participated in Nuestra America convoy and who reports notes praised Venezuela's 2024 elections. The next one you guys are going to know, Amazon Labor Union, a labor union founded by Christian Smalls that participated in the 2026 Nuestra America convoy to Cuba. So they already put the Amazon Labor Union on this list. Antifa says a decentralized group of self-described anti-fascist political activists. Now, I want to harp on this for a second. First of all, to all the people that go, oh my God, Antifa, they're such a terrorist organization. First of all, Antifa is not actually an organization. There is no organization. You can't just like go into Google Docs and fill out an application to become part of Antifa. First of all, it's laughable. Second of all, when it comes to if you're listing anti-fascists as part of someone you're against, what does that say about you? If they're anti-fascist, then that makes you pro what? By the way, if you're going to consider anybody who fight against fascism anti-fascist, then every single one of them soldiers that fought in the Second World War, all them veterans that fought in the Second World War are anti-fascist then. Any U.S. soldier that had any participation in taking out a Nazi, they're anti-fascist. It's peculiar that you would put them on your list, Marco. Interesting. Let's continue on. Asada's Daughters, a Chicago-based Black Lives Matter abolitionist offshoot that trains young activists in the radical spirit of Assata Shakur. Association for Investment in Popular Action Committee. Now, this is a different kind of APAC, a California-based umbrella nonprofit that funds left-wing media and delegations to Cuba and Venezuela. Not all APACs are created equal. Now I have a Democrat, Karen Bass, the current mayor of Los Angeles and former congresswoman, who has a Venceremos Brigade organizer in the 1970s. All because people like her said that, hey, we shouldn't be doing these awful things to Cuba, which the United States has done, especially things like the oil embargo, things like that. And she's a liberal. She's not even on the left, and they're coming after her. Karen Bass? Okay. That's interesting. The next one says Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Code Pink and Global Exchange, who organizes Cuba's solidarity efforts. They're going after Medea Benjamin. They listed her by name. Black Alliance for Peace. Now, this one I want to harp on. An activist group that maps U.S. military bases and police training facilities as targets for radical agitation. Black Alliance for Peace is some of the members of Black Alliance for Peace are people like Ajumo Baraka and Margaret Kimberly. Yes, the Margaret Kimberly that has been on my channel multiple times. Margaret Kimberly that authored the book that I read on my channel, Presidential Black America and the Presidents. That Margaret Kimberly, yes. They're going after people who are trying to stop the wars. They're going after a pro-Black, pro-peace group that is trying to stop U.S. imperialism and wars, especially what the U.S. is doing and trying to do in African countries, in South America as well. That's who they're trying to go after. I want you guys to realize how close to home this hits. This is why I say that Marco Rubio is more scarier than Trump. And remember what I said, that it's a possibility that he could be the nominee for the Republican Party? And everybody was like, oh my God, we may have a worse Trump. Who is it going to be? Is it going to be J.D. Vance? No. It's going to be Marco Rubio. If he ever became president, all hell would break loose. Because not only would he be awful, but he would be also very competent at it. Let's continue on. Black Lives Matter, including the global network and grassroots in that school. A sprawling racial justice is funny. Racial Justice Network, whose leaders and offshoots, report says, have expressed solidarity with the Cuban regime and radical figures like Assata Shakur. So they're not just talking about the global, they're talking about the grassroots. Chelsea Bodin, wait, I said Chelsea, I'm sorry. Chessa. I'm not as familiar with that person. Changing Frequencies, I'm not very familiar with this group, says a Black queer feminist-led abolitionist project aiming to disrupt what it calls, Ken Clipstein, he misspelled that word, said it calls the medical industrial complex. I need to find out more about who this is. Black queer feminist-led abolitionist group. I'm going to see if I can get in touch with them to get their thoughts on this being targeted. Claudia Jones School, Washington, D.C. based organizing collective that conducts popular education and, the report says, pro-Cuba lobbying. Code Pink, Women for Peace, a left-wing protest group that describes itself as anti-war and organizes solidarity delegations to Cuba. So they're coming after Code Pink as well. Ben Cohen, the co-founder of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, who attended the wedding of Neville Roy Singham and Jody Evans. Claudia de la Cruz, remember she ran for president under the PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation, back in 2024, says the co-founder of the People's Forum, IFCO executive director, and 2024 presidential candidate for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Manolo de los Santos says the co-founder and head of People's Forum, who report says maintains a deep relationships with Cuban regime elites. They call them elites, but they're public servants. DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, says a major socialist political organization that has organized official delegations to Cuba. And here's the thing, DSA is, at least the national, they're not very dangerous. Not at all, right? And yet they're on the list. It's weird. Weird to me. Like, they're working within the system. They're more reformist than anything, in my opinion. Now the local chapters, they are a little bit better, in my opinion, than the national, but DSA, they're still more reformist than anything, at least from what I can tell. Eve Ensler says a prominent playwright who attended the wedding of Neville Roy Singham and Jody Evans. Equality of Flatbush said Brooklyn-based Black Lives Matter abolitionist group fighting gentrification, police, and ICE. Jody Evans, the co-founder of Code Pink, who married Neville Roy Singham. George Floyd. It says a Minneapolis man whose 2020 death sparked the nationwide uprisings that report notes were praised by Cuba. Here's the thing, though. George Floyd is dead, so why is he on the list? Alicia Garza says the founder of Black Lives Matter, who credited Assata Shakur as key influence in her organizing work. Amy Goodman, the host of Democracy Now!, who the reports noted attended the wedding of Neville Roy Singham and Jody Evans. So they're going after Amy Goodman. She's been listed. Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees says an activist group led by Black women that organizes to defend Black migrants and block deportations. Isra Hirsi says a campus activist and daughter of Ilhan Omar, who was suspended from Barnard College for organizing anti-Israel encampments before traveling to Cuba. So Ilhan Omar's daughter, IFCL, Pastors for Peace, says an ecumenicial foundation that organizes and caravans leftist regimes and serves as a fiscal sponsor for numerous radical U.S. groups. Paul LaRudy, U.S.-based citizen in San Francisco, who serves as North American coordinator for a pro-Iranian resistance axis coalition, Al-Tajamu. Zorhan Mamdani, they just say mayor of New York. So he's on the list. National Lawyers Guild is on the list. National Network on Cuba is on the list. Ilhan Omar is also on this list. PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation, the People's Forum. Hassan Piker, because he went to Cuba and he actually participated in the convoy to deliver mutual aid to Cuba. Now, here's the funny thing, right? I have my disagreements with Hassan Piker. I do, right? At the same time, it is absolutely wrong and unconscionable for people like him and Cenk Uygur to be banned from traveling to the UK. It is unconscionable for people like him to be detained. Like, he got detained just from visiting France and coming back. Whatever criticism you have of him, and many people have valid criticisms, right? I have mine. At the same time, coming after him should worry all of us, because if they're coming after him, then that means they're going to come after us too. And I also have to give him his props for going to Cuba. Some people may disagree and go, oh, well, he just did that for clout. He still did it, though. He still put himself at risk. Do I have my, I do not like that he funnels people into the Democratic Party. I don't like that. At the same time, he can be good on some things. You know? So I have to give him his props for some of the good he does. I'm not going to sit here and just bash people, you know, for only the bad and not seeing the good. You know? I don't think that's fair. I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me. Ayanna Pressley, also, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Roy Singham. So he says the Shanghai-based American technology magnate who funds various left-wing activist groups. Christian Smalls, I would love to have him on here. So the founder of Amazon Labor Union, and he went to Cuba. Remember, he went to Cuba, and he also was on the flotilla that went to Gaza, and he was picked up by the IDF, and he was the one that was beat. He was one of the only black people there, and he got beat. Thousand Currents. So a progressive nonprofit that sponsored Black Lives Matter Global Network. Antonio Villagrosa. So former mayor of Los Angeles and Speaker of California Assembly, who was Vicermentos Brigade alumnus. Viva Palestina. Of course, that pretty much goes without saying. Maxine Waters is on this list, which is kind of interesting. It's like, Maxine Waters? She's a liberal. She's nowhere near the left, in my opinion. She's a Democratic congresswoman who, report notes, once wrote a letter urging Fidel Castro not to extradite fugitive Assad Shakur. All because she said that she didn't want Assad Shakur to be extradited. Diane Wilson is co-founder of CoPink, and then Witness for Peace Solidarity Collective, an organization that runs recurring solidarity delegations to Cuba. But then he ends, says, guilt by association at its finest, but what exactly are they guilty of? What the report shows that it isn't any of these people who are knowingly taking directions from a foreign power, only that they disagree with the U.S. government on Cuba policy, or at most agree with Cuba. Their views can be wrong, aggressively, offensively wrong even, but it is their goddamn right as Americans to hold them. And here's the thing, right? What did we notice a few years ago? What happened under the Biden administration to a particular group? Was it not the Uhuru Three that were indicted as co-conspirators and unofficial co-conspirators for Russia when they were subject to a pre-dawn raid where they literally had assault rifles drawn with lasers pointed at them for simply speaking out against the United States and what they're doing around the world? And also, I think, going to a conference and speaking to somebody who was from Russia. And apparently, they went after them. Now, this was under the Biden regime. And now the Trump regime is continuing the same thing. And I said it before, and I'll say it again. Fascism is bipartisan, y'all. It is bipartisan. And I'm going to say that till I'm blue in the face, or red in the face, or purple. But the problem is, like, they did that to them just for exercising their free speech. And they're coming after these people on this list for exercising their disgust at what the United States is doing to the Cuban people. And so I spoke to Chairman Omali Yeshitela last week. Go ahead and take a look at that. But this is part of the McCarthyite type of attacks that continue down to this day. Because they have nothing. Look, this economy is trash. So instead of improving the economy, because they're so beholden to corporations, they have to point the finger at somebody somehow. They have to go, oh, well, the reason why your life is bad is because of this, or it's because of that. And now they're trying to say, oh my God, it's the communists that there's their fault that your boss doesn't want to pay you a living wage. It's the communist fault that the United States had no choice but to attack Iran, even though Iran was not a threat. Even the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testified before a congressional hearing that Iran was no threat. And so it's got to be jarring to see your name on a list like this. But one thing I want you guys to also focus on is who isn't on the list. There's some names that I thought would be on the list but are not on the list. And part of it is because they're not a threat. Why aren't they a threat? Maybe because they don't have that much influence, but some of them are pretty big. But yet their name's not on the list. Makes you wonder. So also don't just look at the people who are on the list, but take note of people who are not on the list as well. Now, there could be another list that comes out because there's more people that they're going to comb through. But I'm reminded that what Chairman Omali Yeshitela said, that we don't have these opinions and these ideologies because of some regime telling us that we should think this way or believe this way. It's because we came to this conclusion on our own. It's the same thing with a lot of these people who express, that Cuba should have dignity and their sovereignty. Is that they came to this conclusion on their own, not because of what Cuba said, but because of what the United States has done. You know what I mean? And so when we look at what's going on with them making lists like this, first of all, it's a scare tactic because they want people to sit down and shut up and just accept the United States doing the awful things that it does. And they have to do this. And the government has to do this to set an example. And they're going to choose one person out of that list or one group out of that list to make an example out of. And they're going to do something that the cruelty is going to be the point. The cruelty is going to be the point so that it stops other people from doing what they should be doing to help their fellow neighbors and get us out of a system of exploitation. I was talking to a comrade and she said, what they're probably going to do is debank them. And I'm reminded of what happened to Scott Ritter. And he told Savvy Savs about how he was debanked He's been with his bank for over 20 years, had a great relationship, and he was debanked because of the work that he was doing to end the wars. Mind you, Scott Ritter is a conservative. He's just also deeply anti-war. He was a special weapons inspector for the United Nations. He was a soldier in the U.S. Army. So, I mean, he knows the cost of war, and yet they did the same thing to him. So if they're not going to give any regard to somebody that actually served the country, what makes you think they're going to give any regard to people who have not served the country at that capacity? Marco Rubio is a dangerous person, and you guys should take into consideration that he is going to pursue this as much as he possibly can. But make no mistake about it. Let's say hypothetically 2028 comes and a Democrat wins. This isn't going to change anything because they're still going to continue to go after those groups. It was the Biden Department of Justice that went after the African People's Socialist Party in the Uhuru 3. Biden. And Trump is taking the baton and running with it. It's the same thing that's going to happen with these groups that are on this list. There was an infographic that Biden came out with that talked about people who were in left-wing groups and had left-wing beliefs, and they listed them as potential terrorists. I want you guys to remember that up until 2008, Nelson Mandela was considered a terrorist. Up until 2008, Nelson Mandela was classified. He was under the list of terrorists. So I want you guys to take into heart what the gravity of this situation, and pretty much anybody who is pro-worker, that is against the regime change wars, even if you are somebody who's consider yourself conservative, you need to pay attention to this, because guess what? If you're anti-war, they're going to call you a terrorist. If you're a conservative and you have populist policies, they're going to call you a terrorist as well. They're going to consider you that. And while we have our government that's literally trying to merge the U.S. and the IDF together, I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds like treason. That's high treason. And yet, they want to do that. But having solidarity with workers and wanting people in Cuba to have their own sovereignty and self-determination, that's a bridge too far for them. You know, it's like, yeah, okay. I think there's one more thing that I want to share as well. I think, let me see here. Yeah. Let me share this with you guys. Because remember what I said, every accusation is a confession. Look at this. This is from Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's quote tweeting Thomas Massie. So Thomas Massie said the House will soon take 2 votes that will compromise our sovereignty by merging our military technology and supply chain with Israel's. Said today's vote on House Resolution 1438 brings the National Defense Authorization Act to the floor without a vote on striking Section 219. And then tomorrow's vote is to pass the National Defense Authorization Act. Right? Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene says this is the ultimate betrayal that will never be undone. It is literally treason. And so I think I said, I'm gonna be getting into this in a minute, but it says, yeah, Piers Morgan is trying to get Max Blumenthal to say one bad thing about Iran. Meanwhile, we have this BS happening in our own government. But yet they're also trying to go after left-wing groups who are trying to stop the regime change wars and basically a slow and awful genocide of the Cuban people. And so this is why somebody like Marco Rubio is extremely dangerous. Because as long as this system exists, there are going to be people like him that are continuously going to be in favor of the parasite class so that they can own everything and live their paradise here on earth, while you will own nothing and be forced to be happy under their terms. Watch this space. All right, guys, go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you so very much. Let's go into, let me check on, let me see the kick chat. Ooh, neck cramp. Oh. I mean, hey, if Charlie Kirk can die right before he changes his stance on Iran, what makes you think that they aren't eyeing the rest of us? I'm just saying. Allegedly. All right, so let me check kick chat. I think we're good. I think we're okay now. Okay. And then let's check on the Rumble. See if we have any Rumble rants. I think we're good there. Okay. All right. And then the YouTube chats. All right. Alrighty. Oh, I think I missed this one. Thank you for this, Roger. He says, look up 21st Century Road to Housing Act became law without Trump's signature due to passing both chambers by veto-proof majority by private equity from buying homes. I think I remember that. As far as the private equity part, it is minimal. It's not that big of a deal because in the grand scheme of things, private equity has not purchased that many homes in the grand scheme of things. It is a good thing, but it is not like a huge chunk of the housing stock that has been bought up by them. But yes, that is a positive thing. Roger Meadow says Green Party is not on that list. So either they're not seen as a threat or they're under the control of the Dems or government or all of the above. I didn't see them on the list. Yeah. There's a few other organizations and people that I have not seen on the list. We shall see in the very near future. Edward says Rubio is a disgusting human being. He is a colonizer and has a family who is a drug pusher. I just noticed that his ears are as big as his head. Yeah. Is he human? I'm just asking a question. Sela says, while a spineless worm, Rubio distracts us with these Cold War propaganda, full speech, USA destroying self-determination both domestically and worldwide. Jacqueline says, bollocks. Leah says, or is it Leanne? I'm sorry. Says he is insane. Yeah. He's the worst, man. A non-user says, because greatness ceases to exist without being able to profit from it. Duh. Yeah. Oh, thank you for this, Roger. He says Washington State primaries, August 14th, not today. Sawant is not running in Dem Party, so she will meet Adam in general. Got it. Thank you very much for that, Roger. Appreciate it. Mary Ploppins says, unfortunately, doctors in the U.S. commit genocidal atrocities every day. That's why I don't want their health care. They make us sick, then pretend to fix us. Ananju says, I personally have experienced negative effects on the medical system, but I try to avoid as much as possible. Whew. Wow, man. This is crazy. Roger says, JB, you and Savvy should be disappointed you two were not on this list. Time to step up your game. Hey, man, we're not. Well, look, if Savvy's not big enough, I'm definitely not big enough. That's all I got to say. Yeah, I'm nowhere near. I mean, if you guys want me to be big enough, subscribe to the channel. But I appreciate it. Yeah. Holly says Rashida Tlaib. I didn't see her on the list. Yeah. Edward says, I know that John Fetterman won't be on the list because he's pro-Israel, not pro-worker. He is not progressive. And he's a racist that looks like one of the giants off of Game of Thrones. Jose says, it's one party with two faces. There is no chance of stopping the Epstein cartel. Wow. All right, everybody. We're going to go into the next segment now. Oh, my goodness. We're going to watch a takedown. A takedown. I cannot wait to get into this. This is going to be pretty awesome. And I am excited for this one. Pretty much because this is going to be Piers Morgan, I guess, wasn't trying to make it into a debate, but it ended up becoming one. So I'm just like, you know what? This is going to be something special. So let me make sure I'm right there. Oh, wait. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's get into the final segment here, guys. Of course, we talked about the foreclosure crisis and homelessness that are on the rise. We talked about Marco Rubio's list. And now we're going to talk about Max versus Piers. So Max Blumenthal pushes back on Piers Morgan on his show. Let's get into this here. Cooked. Oh my goodness. Max Blumenthal cooked Piers Morgan to the point that Piers Morgan was more than just well done. He got fried, fricasseed, he got grilled, he got broiled, he got boiled, he got steamed. Oh my goodness. I mean, Lord. I don't know. It was maximum pressure. So as we talked about last week, Max Blumenthal actually recently was in Iran as he was covering the funeral of the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and he's come back to the United States to talk to Piers Morgan about his reporting on what happens. But of course, Piers Morgan, being the stenographer for Western Empire that he is, he couldn't help himself but to try to go the Iran route of do you condemn Hamas? And so it's just it didn't go very well for Piers Morgan, and we're gonna watch this. You're gonna laugh, guys. I think that Max Blumenthal came and did the journalism thing. So let's get into this. Now, this, for the most part, is most of this was Piers Morgan talking to clavicular, clavicle, clerical, whatever his name is. But the ending, he talks to Max Blumenthal. So I want you guys to watch along with me, and we shall go over this. Yeah, it's going to be a classic takedown by Max Blumenthal. We will stop in intervals. So let's go.
Welcome back to Uncensored.
Good to see you, Piers.
First question, why did you go to Iran? And in particular, why would you want to be known to have attended the Ayatollah's funeral?
Well, I went to Iran on a press visa, just like every other journalist who was there. All the mainstream members of the press entered the same way I did. I applied through the Iranian e-visa system, picked up my press visa at the interest section, and went in and covered the largest funeral, not just the largest funeral, I think it was the largest gathering in human history. And I gained insights I would have never gotten about the state of the Islamic Republic and its constituents and what they wanted as, we were on the brink of returning to a U.S.-Israeli imposed war on Iran. While I was there, I was able to interview officials. I interviewed the mayor of Tehran, Ali Reza Zakani, who presided over the 10 million strong funeral procession for Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. I interviewed academics. I interviewed negotiators. I participated in a press conference with all these other members of the foreign press corps from CNN, ITV, Guardian, NBC. And I was just doing journalism around the country. And most importantly, I was able to report on the first phase of the war and the war crimes committed by my government. I think I was the first American reporter to visit a neighborhood in eastern Tehran where 40 people were massacred when the US dropped 8 bombs on an entire neighborhood. I went inside the ruins of a home where an entire family had been slaughtered except for 2 members who had been out of town. I visited the Rafiniya Synagogue, a Jewish congregation in Iran, which had been destroyed by Israeli bombing. Yes, Israel attacked a synagogue with 2 missiles. And the last time I went to Iran last year, I produced a documentary about the Jewish community in Iran. So this was of enormous interest to me. I went to the Gandhi Hospital, which had its ICU unit and IVF clinic destroyed in a U.S. bombing after the U.S. bombed the IRIB media complex across the street, targeting journalists. And
first of all, I want to give Max props for also highlighting the fact that, if I'm correct, that Iran has one of the largest Jewish populations outside of Israel in West Asia. And so they literally have synagogues in Iran, which are treated with dignity in that country, you know, and they're allowed to practice Judaism freely within Iran. And so, and remember, Max Blumenthal is Jewish as well. So he, you know, to try to go the anti-Semite, you know, label on him, you can't do that. It doesn't stick. And the fact that he's bringing this out also means that you have, like, Piers would have to go a different route. And so he can't just say, well, you're anti-Semitic. It's like, no, he is a Jewish person, and he is actually showing how Judaism is alive and well in Iran as well. And so it's just like how a lot of people say that, you know, the United States is a majority Christian nation, which technically is true, but, you know, we have Muslims, we have, you know, we have atheists, we have people who are, you know, Buddhists, Taoism, you know, we have many different people of many different religions here in the United States as well. So it's not, you know, the exact same thing that what a lot of people like Piers Morgan would say. They would say things like, oh, it's an Islamic regime. And it's like, okay, well, then the United States is a Christian regime. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't stick. So let's continue on.
I visited the Azadi Stadium, a volleyball and wrestling stadium, which hosted international competitions, which was bombed deliberately by the United States to ruins, as, you know, in kind of a preview of the DHS trying to rig the FIFA competition against Iran's national team by denying them entry. Right. So I gained all this journalistic insight.
Right, but my question for you would be what I think a lot of your critics say, which is, okay, but how much attention and reporting have you done on, for example, the many thousands of civilians that the regime in Iran brutally murdered in January, for example? Have you...
Okay, so Max is there to cover what the United States and Israel have done, right? Why do you have to go over what allegedly Iran has done when in reality he's there to cover the war, right? The war that was technically started by the United States on, what was it, the 28th of February? Right? And so he's there to cover that. But you want to go after something that happened, that was an internal conflict that happened. Well, technically it was internal, but Max is going to explain how the United States was instrumental in that as well. That wasn't involved with the Iran war. It wasn't even involved during the 12-day war last year. And so see how people like Piers Morgan is trying to weave in, oh my God, well, they're so awful. And here's the funny thing. You want to, gosh, are we going to talk about the battle on Blair Mountain? Are we going to talk about the 1985 MOVE bombing? Are we going to talk, like, if we're going to go, you know, apples to apples, oranges to oranges, bananas to bananas, then why not talk about the Black Wall Streets that were constantly destroyed and bombed? Let's talk about the Black neighborhoods, that the Black American neighborhoods that were taken away from us and then either burned to the ground, stolen from us through eminent domain, or they were buried underwater and created into lakes. And so all those thousands of Americans that were harmed by the United States, we don't talk about that, but then, you know, if a country does something similar to its own people, then we have to poo-poo that. And here's the thing. Did Iran actually do that? Or let's hear what Max Blumenthal has to say on that one.
Have you been to the side of that? Have you been to investigate that?
I did, and I'll get into that. I would directly address that, but let me just wrap up this point that I was making. While I was there, I was targeted by allies of the administration who are representing a foreign apartheid state called Israel. The Canary Mission, for example, which is based out of a foundation in Jerusalem called Megamat Shalom. It is not an American group, targeted me, painting me as some kind of extremist who had gone to this funeral to honor Khamenei when I went to report on it from my unique point of view. Laura Loomer not only called for me to be arrested and hauled off my flight and dared DHS Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen, who has also been subject to Israeli influence, to do that. She called for me to be murdered along with every other journalist who is on the scene. She called for the United States military to massacre all funeral attendees, which would include me and all the journalists.
Well, she's a complete lunatic. She's a complete lunatic. No. She's a complete lunatic. But I.
Well, let me respond to that. She may have been committed to a mental institution. That may be true, but she's also very influential in the Trump administration, and she is responsible. And this is a confirmed fact, Piers. She is responsible for the firing of the top Iran expert in the Trump administration, Nate Swanson, at the NSC, who warned Trump that if the U.S. attacked Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz. So she's taking responsibility.
Hang on. So, first of all, Piers loves to interrupt, which I'm like, dude, stop interrupting. Let people finish their point. Damn it. But also, if Laura Loomer really is a lunatic, then they would not listen to her at all. And yet, her lunacy, right, works for the regime. So therefore, they're going to allow the lunacy to drive policy and drive actions of the regime. So that means that they're complicit in her doing what she's doing. People only do what you allow them to do. So yeah, they can say, "Oh my God, Laura Loomer, she's out of her mind," but you're allowing her and you're listening to her anyway, and you're still doing the actions of what she recommends. So therefore, you're using her lunacy, her mental illness, as a cover to do what you already wanted to do. That's what you're doing. It's sick, to be honest with you, because you're literally using somebody who has some mental health issues as a cover to allow you to do horrible, unconstitutional acts to U.S. citizens. It's just, no shame in their game, I tell you.
Look, I have been very, very critical of this war from the start. I didn't see the point of it. I didn't say it could be anything but a fiasco. I think it's been a fiasco. I think it's an ongoing fiasco. But in relation to the question I asked you, though, to establish credentials of journalistic impartiality, did you go to the scene of where the Iranian regime massacred its own people?
Well, first of all, I'm not impartial. I'm absolutely not impartial.
Right.
I am not objective. And the concept of objectivity, as we understand it, is set out by the corporate media according to the parameters devised for them by their militant Zionist ruling class owners.
But did you go to the scene?
Did you go to the scene of the that you appear on and others appear on? So I'm not impartial.
Understand.
But to your direct question,
Okay, so first of all, let's make this abundantly clear. There is really no objectivity in journalism. Let's make that point clear. That's what Max Blumenthal just said. So every single time, anytime you actually watch a journalist, they are going to be partial in some way or another. For instance, if you watch MS Now, Fox News, Newsmax, News Nation, CBS, New York Times, Washington Post, Axios, they are going to be biased in a corporate direction. They have a bias. They do. I don't have a bias. Mine is pro-worker, pro-marginalized people, anti-war, right? I have a bias. I do. Do not let any person, no matter who they are, tell you that they don't have a bias, because they damn sure do. It just depends on where that bias lies. And does that bias serve the people at large, or does it serve a very small group of people at the top? You know where I stand whenever I talk about something, right? Now, I try to be as accurate as I possibly can be, right? And when I'm wrong, I'm going to say so, which there's a point that I'm wrong and I got corrected. I'll be talking about that when we get into the super chats later. Shout out to Savvy Savs for that one. But here's the thing, right? A lot of these news outlets, if they are wrong, they'll say it very quietly and they'll just whisper and be like, oh, sorry, we have to retract this story, blah, 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 blah. But they still want you to think in the direction and under the narrative that the corporations and the Epstein class want you to think. So when Max Blumenthal said, yeah, I am not purely objective. I do have a bias. He's being honest with you. He's being real. When Fox News kept saying fair and balanced, you and I both know that was bullshit. You can smell the BS. You caught a big whiff of it. But it's the same thing with all these different companies too. And yes, Piers Morgan has it too. It's just his is towards the empire. Let's continue on.
That question,
Yeah.
and I really want to have a conversation about how this reflects on journalism and the Constitution. But to your direct question, you previously hosted me in January, and basically I was sandbagged. I was sandwiched between a actual war criminal, Jonathan Conricus from the Israeli military, and 3 Iranian monarchists. And I debated this very question. And I acknowledged that at least 3,000 people were killed in 2 days of protests, which the Israeli Mossad and U.S. intelligence have expressly taken credit for. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, explicitly took credit for fawning these riots by devaluing Iran's currency. The Iranian government has released the IDs and names of everyone who was killed there. 3,000 people is a lot of people, but they were not all just innocent protesters, and many of them were police officers. This all began with attacks on police stations, and I was actually, while I was there, and I'm about to produce a report on this, able to interview some off-duty cops. I wasn't set up to meet them. I started a conversation with them, and they told me how their police stations came under attack, how police officers were burned and killed. Some were beheaded by the People's MEK, which is a CIA-backed militant organization. There were also Kurdish militant groups like Khamenei and PJAK, which were involved. These were militarized riots. They weren't innocent protests, and it was a bridge between the 12-day war from last year to the current war, which you say you opposed. But, I watched you manufacture consent for that war by allowing people to lie about the number who were killed, claiming 40,000, 50,000.
Well, I don't think you know how many.
No
I don't
evidence
think.
Okay, so he basically just debunked the whole do you condemn or did you cover about what Iran did, when in reality there's a lot more nuance to that conversation that that Max Blumenthal just brought to you, that it wasn't just some evil regime. You also got to remember that the United States and Israel also had a hand in the deaths of people, because they also had CIA-backed groups that were within there that's trying to foam up some discord, so then people would be murdered so that they can point and go, see what Iran did, when in reality the United States and Israel is exactly the outcome that they wanted, so that it would create conditions that people would be okay with Iran being bombed because of something that the United States and Israel basically foamed up, right? And so this is why it's so important to get news from real independent journalists and real independent media, because a lot of times they will try to spin things against, having a blanketed boogeyman and say, oh, well, it's Iran or it's China or it's Russia or it's Cuba, blah, 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 without actually getting the nuance as to exactly what is going on from on the ground. Max Blumenthal was literally on the ground in Iran. Where was Piers Morgan? He could have gotten a journalism visa. He could have went to Tehran. He could have covered the funeral for Khamenei. He could have been there. But did he go? He has the means and the resources to do that. But did he go? I think you guys got to take a look at that. We got to be asking these questions.
You know any better than they do how many were killed. But
I do know, and Iran International.
Well, you
which
don't.
Is
You know what the Iranian
regime's
regime told you.
No, Iran International.
Hang on. Like, you know what the Iranian regime told you, and so we should believe what the U.S. tells us about certain numbers too? God, let me stop pausing.
National, which is basically run by Israel and used to be run by the Saudis, has acknowledged that less than 5,000.
I've seen multiple reports.
Again, it's a lot.
Listen,
but
I
the
don't know
evidence is
I don't
very
know the
clear.
exact number, nor do you, nor do I don't think anybody else does. And hopefully one day we will find out.
Okay, Piers, what would the UK? Piers, what would the UK do if Russian intelligence and Chinese intelligence were arming rioters to attack police stations?
You know what we wouldn't do?
I do burning churches.
Well, look,
what do you think would happen in the UK?
Well, what we were going to do is, we were going to have you debate with somebody. Will Chamberlain wanted to do it. You didn't want to debate with him. He sent this message.
I don't even know who that is. Is that
okay? Well,
he's like the basketball
he's a regular
player?
guest on my show, and he's somebody who.
And then you wanted me to debate like a pansexual former Disney actor.
Okay,
I mean, I'm just going to read. I deserve some respect.
It's okay. You're not debating with me. You're debating with me. But Will Chamberlain sent this message: Max Blumenthal is a traitorous scumbag and an apologist for the most evil regimes in the world. He shouldn't be surprised if custom officials have some questions for him after he returns from doing a PR tour for a country we're conducting major military operations against. What would you have said if he'd said that to your face on here?
Well, in a liberal democracy, you have to go before a judge and demonstrate suspicion of criminal activity to get a warrant. What happened with me was a warrantless, illegal, unconstitutional seizure of my devices after foreign lobbyists, proxies for a genocidal foreign state, pushed a Trump administration, which is basically merged with that state, and I can discuss that in detail, to arrest me and harass me and seize my devices. There was no suspicion of criminal activity. If there was, all of my devices would have been seized, not just
got them back
my
now?
phones. This is the violation of the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment. And let me make just one point about the UK, your country, versus the United States, because my friend Dan Kovalik, who's a human rights lawyer, just had his devices seized coming into the UK. Sarah Wilkinson is a Palestine solidarity activist who's going to trial in the UK for Twitter posts. Richard Medhurst is a British journalist who's been prosecuted by the UK. My friend, the journalist Asa Winstanley, had his home raided for suspicion of terrorism purely for his journalism. Hassan Piker and Cenk Uygur, who are basically voices of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, banned from the UK.
Well,
Jeremy Lafredo,
I'm sure you're aware. If you're not aware, you should be aware.
The one thing that separates us from the UK is the Constitution.
Listen,
and the Constitution should be enforced.
I vociferously went into bat for Cenk Uygur of those names because he's been a regular on my show, and I thought it was preposterous what happened to him. So, final question, because we run out of time.
So we cannot allow ourselves to become the UK and the US.
Final question.
And that's why. Yeah,
Max,
go ahead,
final
Piers.
question. Just give me one bad thing about the Iranian regime.
What in the hell is wrong with Piers? Give me one thing that's bad about the Iranian regime. What? Is this what counts as journalism these days? That's like a kindergarten teacher asking students, okay, kids, now I want you guys to get along, so just tell me one good thing that you like about the other person. Just give me one good thing. Can you say something nice to little Johnny? Like, what is this? What is this infantilization? What the hell is wrong with this guy? You should have stayed on America's Got Talent or Britain's Got Talent. Like, because when it comes to journalism, you trying to search for talent, and talent is winning and hiding from you. Like, my God, like, he's making my head itch right now. Because what kind of question is that? You just got all this nuanced information from Max Blumenthal, and now you're like, name one good thing about Iran. Okay, one bad thing about Iran. It's stupid. That's the child. What in the hell is wrong with this man?
I will, but let me just say that
just
we
answer
have
the
filed a
question.
lawsuit.
Just one bad thing.
We have filed a lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security.
I get that.
Yunus is leading this lawsuit for the Arab American Anti-Discrimination
Okay, but just to answer my question.
And after that lawsuit was filed, my phones were returned, and we're continuing the lawsuit. And what bad
and we'll
thing
see,
should I
how that plays
about
out.
Iran? I mean,
we'll see how it plays out. In answer to my question, give me one bad thing about the Iranian regime.
More diverse foods.
Just one bad.
He won't even let Max finish because Max is burying him with facts about what happened. Right? Why in the world would they be doing this against a journalist for covering the truth on the ground about what's going on there? Why is the truth so dangerous? And yet he keeps I just want you to answer the question. I just want you to answer the question. Piers, zip your lip and listen. But here's the thing. It's hard to hear what other people are saying if somebody's talking over them. And Piers knows this because he doesn't want people to hear exactly what Max is saying. Because if they hear exactly what Max is saying, then they go, I think he has a point here. So he has to interrupt so that people don't clearly hear what Max is saying. That's a ploy to make sure that even when people speak the truth, that you don't get to really hear it. It's the verbal equivalent of putting his hand over Max's mouth.
I'm not a big kebab guy, but the kebab is great. Iranians are having a robust debate, and it's up to us to leave them alone, to have that debate, to reform within. Iran is not our enemy.
I get it, but just finally.
So he gave his critique. Max doesn't like kebabs. Okay. Iranians, they love kebabs. I'm not a kebab guy. Okay. Take that critique and run with it, Piers. Run like the wind. It's so silly. What is this? What is that?
Is not forcing the United States or compelling the United States to go to war. Israel is.
Max, just one more time. Give me one bad thing about the Iranian regime.
I just did.
What was it?
I mean, what kind of game is this? That one bad thing about Iran? Again,
just give me about the regime.
Not our enemy.
One bad thing about the regime.
Iran is not. Piers. I'm not Shia. Okay, I'm not a religious conservative.
Can you think of any bad thing about the regime in Iran?
I'm not going to play these Orientalist games.
It's not a game. It's a very straightforward question.
What a bad thing is, I'm a product of a liberal democracy like you are, and I'm not to judge them. And we are currently slaughtering their children. And you're asking me to say one bad thing. This really highlights.
Can you not think of a single bad thing about the Iranian regime?
Press media, where I'm supposed to say one bad thing.
Can you think of one
about them?
One? Only want one.
Oh, are you going to get one?
Do I get one?
Can you think about one bad thing about phone hacking? Because you were aware of
it's completely wrong.
What? I mean, you were found culpable for knowledge of hacking into phones. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to play silly Orientalist games?
Everybody knows that.
I mean, I already lost brain cells sitting through your interview with Clavicular. So why do I have to play these silly?
He lost brain cells listening to him interview Clavicular. Clavicular, clavicle, clerical, whatever his name is. Oh Lord. One thing about Max Blumenthal is he's always good for a laugh. That was brilliant.
Games.
I've
I want to
only
talk about
asked you to
journalism.
name one bad thing about the Iranian regime. I've given you multiple opportunities to say one. You couldn't say one. I think viewers can
Would you even call
viewers
the
can make
Britain
their
a
own minds
regime?
up.
I mean,
Max
this is it.
Blumenthal,
You wouldn't even
I've got to
call
leave it
the
there.
UK
I
a
gave you
regime.
multiple chances. You couldn't
Would
think
you
of a
call the
single
UK a
bad
regime?
thing
You
to
live under
say
a regime.
about the
You're part of a
Iranian
regime. You
regime. So we're
enforce the
going to leave it
regime.
there. Max
Would you call
Blumenthal,
the UK
thank you
a
very much
regime?
indeed.
And that's the end. That's the end. Like, dude, it's so sophomoric of a question. That's how it's like. How can I compare it? Like, that's the best question you can come up with. Or not even question, be like, name one bad thing. Guys, support independent media. And by the way, Piers Morgan is not independent media. Support real independent media. Because it's crazy. It's crazy how somebody like him will ask a question like that from somebody who was actually on the ground covering exactly what happened in Iran. And he's going to try to cover for the West and try to give people a reason to demonize another country, even though the United States is the one that hit first. And now he's trying to, damn, like how far does Rupert Murdoch have his hand up your ass, dude? Moving your mouth like a puppet. Jeez Louise. But yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, Piers Morgan got cooked. And that's what happens when Max Blumenthal comes on. And the thing is, it's like Piers Morgan, first of all, you need to stop interrupting people. You need to let people finish. But he's not. And so, yeah, I thought that would be interesting to cover because ultimately, when they really don't have a leg to stand on, they try to do sophomoric, infantile things like this in order to make it seem like, oh, well, they're just propagandists for these awful regimes, when in reality, every accusation is a confession. Piers, you need to look in the mirror, pal. Jesus Christ. All right, guys, go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you so very much. I don't know why it's not showing up this time. But thank you so much. And we're going to go into, let's check kick. I think we're good. Yeah, we're good. Okay. And then see if we have any Rumble rants. Okay. I think we're good there. Boom, boom. Yep. All right, let's go into the rest of the chat. All right, so thank you for this super chat, Savvy Sabs, sister in the chat. So she says, not quite true. Shama is automatically in the primary because Seattle has a jungle primary. She only makes it to the general election if she's in the top two. Her and Adam Smith raised the most money. So yeah, so I stand corrected. Thank you so very much for that. But yeah, if she makes it to the general, then that'll be her versus Adam Smith. But she also needs to have people bring her on and big names, and it should not be based on just a business decision. It should be based on journalism. And I'm being honest with you, like the answer that Ryan Grimm gave us about not having her on, sound more like it was just a business decision rather than a journalistic one, which is deeply disappointing. Just saying. Grigor says Max the Mighty Blumenthal. Start calling him Max the Mighty. Billy says, yes, Max and Professor Morandi. Yes, Professor Morandi is a brilliant guy. If you want to know more about Iran, then talk to Professor Morandi. Jacqueline says, my favorite Piers Morgan inadvertent self-embarrassment was when Piers Morgan Mick Lynch interview. Oh my goodness. My gosh. Crazy Cat says, damn right, we're humans, not robots, and we have opinions and feelings. Absolutely. Very well said. Very well said. Let me see. Yes, Mary Poppins. Fomented. I think that's the word I was looking for. Oh my gosh. Oh no, Sean. I don't know if I can read that. But Max verbally him good. No, you did not, Sean. Yeah, Roger says, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sila says Israelis are not Semitic. I think he meant Semitic. So any protest or criticism of them is not anti-Semitic. Morgan's whole show promotion of European entitlements over another level, Euro-USA aggressors, anti-blackness. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, man. But I do have to give my props to Max Blumenthal for going in and dismantling a lot of what Piers Morgan was saying. So I appreciate that. Let me see. I'm going to make sure I didn't miss any super chats before I head on my way out. I know I'm way over time, but I just want to make sure I get everybody because, well, people spend their hard-earned money, and I want to make sure that people are heard. I think we're good. Okay, and I'm going to share something funny at the end because, well, why not? So I do want to share a funny video, something that makes us laugh. Of course, the way Max Blumenthal actually dismantled Pierce was actually pretty good, but why not laugh just a little bit more? Let me see. Hey, do I have something? Uh-oh. Ah, my Instagram's not working. What's going on here? I had some funny stuff. I don't know what's going on. Oh no. It says something went wrong. It's not my fault. Oh, all right. I hope that I can go over this maybe next time. Oh well. I had something fun, but alrighty. Sorry guys. It's not working right now. But next week I will be live, of course, with news stories. And I hope you guys are able to tune in for that as well. And please keep an eye on, what's going on, especially what's going on with this list from Marco Rubio, because Marco Rubio is going to try his best to silence all of us. And I think that's important that we get out of this. And try to push for, worker solidarity. So guys, thank you so very much for tuning in. You guys have been wonderful. Thank you so very much to everybody. Sela says they're after you, JB, even if you're not on the list. That's inevitable, but we will continue to give as much dignity to people in this world, because I'm tired of living in a system that strips them of it. So, like I always say, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Do all the things if you got them. And please make sure to keep in mind and try to help the people who are going through housing insecurity as much as possible, because they need our assistance. I know what it's like to be housing insecure, and it is a very daunting and dreadful feeling. And please continue to do what you can. Let's try to organize and do what we can for the people out there, because they need it the most. I love you guys for being who you are. You guys take care. And one more thing, forehead kisses, and have yourself a beautiful evening. Good night, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you'd like to see any more, you can look here.